So uh, for the people that know me, they would tell you that I have a tendency when I get aggravated or when I'm trying to make a point, I have a tendency to be a little bit more sarcastic. It's just my nature. I'm not mean. I'm just a little bit sarcastic. And I think that I had a little bit of sarcasm in place when I came up with the title of this message on retention, which is how to keep your agents longer than a phone call. I mean, that's obviously sarcastic. But the reality is that the struggle with retention, which has been going on for decades in the contact center, just kind of makes me a little bit irritable. And so that's why I picked the title. But I'm hoping that my irritation doesn't come through over the next 45 or 50 minutes that we're together, but that actually I can share with you some information that I think will bring some value to you. Only you'll know that, and you'll be the ones that get to measure that. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. First up, I want you to recognize the fact that we do have chat. I should be able to see your chat. Hopefully you can hear me. If somebody just would go out on chat and just say, I can hear you, and I am listening, then that way at least I know that there's somebody here and somebody actually listening. So somebody pop up something on chat which says, hey, kind of like Horton hears a who. So there you go, I can hear you. Thank you so much. So now I know you exist. Well, that's really great. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So I've got a bunch of stuff to tell you. And first off, just a little bit about our company. It's called Proponency. We have a SaaS platform that actually directly and specifically focuses on this area of retention and engagement. And you'll see a little bit of that along the way. And so let's just wait and see what happens. So the next thing is that it's impossible to do any sort of a webinar and not have some sort of numbers. But most of the numbers that you look at when it comes to contact centers and it comes to retention, they're kind of depressing. And they're depressing for the fact that you could see that 38% in 2022 was, was the level of turnover. I think that number is probably a little bit low. I always look at turnover, and my first question is always, are you holding on to your best people? If you're holding on to your best people, that's the first thing you have to do, because if the only people that are leaving are the ones that you really want to stay and the ones that you don't want to stay are the ones that are staying and you're just trying to hold on to warm bodies, then that's a really bad circumstance to be in. So I know I'm not going to ask you to declare whether your retention or your turnover rate is worse than 38% or better. If it's just a little bit better than 38%, I don't think you should have any sort of warm, fuzzy feelings going on. If it's worse than that, you should be depressed. But the reality is that I think there is something you can do about it, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So let's get to it. If you're showing up late after this, you now are missing content. So right out of the gates, why high turnover? First thing I think we need to look at is the fact that some of it's just built in. I mean, it's the business we're in. We're taking entry-level people. Our pay rates are not really high. I say all the time that, people are usually motivated by fear, fame, fun, or fortune. If you're in the contact center industry, you're not motivated by fortune, probably not fear. So it's going to be fun or fame. And so it's just low-paying jobs. It's wildly stressful. Whether you're working by yourself at home or you're working in an environment, it's just hard. But I think we have to very first immediately we have to embrace the fact that there is some that's built in. And I know all of you probably have that number in your head, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. But I really think that it's something we need to embrace it. We need to plan for it, because we know we're going to have we're going to have turnover. We're going to have to replace. And I think that most important, and the reason for this webinar is that I want you to be able to thrive with it. I want you to be able to learn to thrive with the turnover that you have. And hopefully I'm going to say something in the next hours that's going to allow you to thrive while you have turnover. So why do you have turnover? The main reason that you have high turnover is because of your culture. It's just really that simple. If that's uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. And usually the number one area is hiring. You just don't hire well. And either you don't hire well because you don't understand it. The people that are doing the hiring are incompetent, or you're so desperate for human beings that you'll take anything with a pulse. And as a result of that, you used to have standards. You've changed your standards. You've lowered your standards. You don't have any standards at all anymore, because you just need bodies. I recognize it. I feel your pain. I understand the fact that in reality, it's almost better off to have somebody that's going to get it right every once in a while, rather than having no one at all. But the reality is that hiring is at the top of the list. The second reason that you probably have high turnover from your culture is because you have frontline leadership that hasn't been equipped to do the job that they need to do. I don't know whether you know this or not, but most of the highfalutin executives that you have in an organization, very few of them have 15 to 25 people working directly for them. They'll have 4, 5, maybe 7, maybe they'll push 9. And most of these people have been to college. They've got some sort of an advanced degree, and they've been running really large organizations, but they don't have the kind of manager to person ratio that you have on the front line. So that's the first challenge we've got. And then the second one is that usually the people that are supervisors are people that were the very best employees that you had on the floor. You're trying to hold on to them. They want to make more money. They want to advance. They want a career. So we move them up into leadership. So what we do is we take really valuable, smart people off the phone and we put them into a job that they've probably never done before, probably haven't been trained on. Depending on your organization, you give them some form of training, but usually it stops. And we don't equip them with the skills and the information that they need to be able to deal with the vast array of challenges that we have in our organizations. Another reason is every day is a fire drill. When you walk in, your wait times are just going through the moon. I'm not telling you don't have anything you don't already know. There's some of you probably listening to this webinar right now, and yours are skyrocketing through the ceiling. And it's every fiber of your being not to stop this webinar and go off and jump on the phones or go tell somebody to jump on the phones, but it's a fire drill. Next reason is that a lot of organizations, many BPOs, they're contract driven, which means that their impetus, their driving force is just meeting their contract, as opposed to pursuing excellence or pursuing the things that are necessary so that you can, rather than survive, you can actually thrive. Many organizations just have the wrong tools. They've got a bunch of tools, but they've got the wrong tools. And as a result, the tools that they have, it's kind of self-inflicted. They don't have, I ran into a contact center the other day that had 400 people in the contact center and they didn't have a workforce management program. I mean, that sounds like the definition of insanity, but sometimes people just don't have the right tools. The next one is that we're unable to admit who we really are. You know, if you run a center that's really, really challenging and the calls that you're taking are miserable and it's just a high stress, very, very difficult organization, you always don't have enough people, you struggle to bring people in, and it's just a firefight every day. Well, the reality is you need to recognize and embrace the fact that you need firefighters. And those are the kind of people you need to hire, and you probably need to be telling them right up front, listen, we only need firefighters. The only people that make it here are people that are so looking forward to just getting into a fight every day, and they thrive on the fact that they can fight and churn and grit their teeth through their entire day. That's recognizing who you are and then looking for people that fit into that. Another one is just plain pure fundamentals. You're just sloppy. You know what you need to do, you just don't do it very well, and usually it's because you're busy or you don't have the resources or you're too busy hiring or too busy filling holes for people that aren't competent and don't know what they're doing. And then finally, you're unwilling or you just don't know how to compete. And the reality is you're pretty good at what you do, but the 4 contact centers that are within 15 or 20 miles of you are just kicking your butt and you just don't know how to compete. So I don't know whether I hit every one of them or not, but I certainly hit a number of them. So I know that you're not going to listen to everything I say unless I talk about hiring really quickly, because it's usually the number one thing that people have. So I just wanted to right out of the gates give you some hiring quick hits so we can settle that, and then we can move on to some of the other things that we have the potential to change. The first one is you need to embrace your culture. You really need to be clear on who you are and on where you're going. It's so important. I mean, I just mentioned it's so important that you blatantly and clearly know exactly who you are and that you communicate that in the hiring process. And I know you run the risk that, well, maybe I might miss some people, maybe I might scare some people away. Well, you might scare some people away, but in the same time, you might also get some people that are going to stick around for a really long time because you've told them. I've said for years that there's 2 types of education that you can give in new hire training. There's the ones that you give them, and they're the ones that they get when they get out on the floor. I cannot tell you the number of organizations that seem to hold on to people through new hire training and nesting, and then they get out on the floor and everybody leaves. And the reason is because the culture and the experience that they have in new hire training and nesting is not when they have when they got on the floor. It's like Disney Fantasyland when you're in the beginning, and then they get out on the floor and it's just it's a nightmare, right? It's just a completely different experience. Until you're willing to embrace who you are and connect them up and make them the same, you're always going to struggle. Second up, a great hiring quick hit is to use and learn from your trainers. I've never met a trainer on planet Earth that didn't brag that they could tell you who was going to make it within the first 10 minutes of training, that they could immediately tell you who could make it and who can't. I think you ought to be rotating those trainers through your hiring. You got to rotate these trainers through your hiring, let them help you hire people. Make sure that your trainers are talking on a regular basis to the people that are doing the hiring so they can tell them the skills and attributes they're looking for. They ought to be the ones that are helping with the questions. They ought to be the ones that are actually doing it. I think that taking your new hire trainers and running them through being part of your hiring, it's a great other option for them. It gives them something different to do. I think it's wildly valuable. Next up is let your employees hire. I learned this from Tim Montgomery years ago. Have your employees interview, whether it be by panel or whether it be group or team. Let your employees choose who the people are that are going to work beside them. They can tell you very quickly whether the person fits or not. I've often said that hiring is a little bit more like a fraternity or a sorority rush than it really is about job hiring. We want people to come into the organization, they're going to thrive and they're going to excel. And that means there are certain skills and attributes and personalities and things that they're capable of that just kind of fit. I'm not talking about keeping certain people from being in. That's not what I'm saying, but the sooner you embrace who you are, the sooner that you engage with that, let your employees hire. The next one is to focus on your strengths, whatever they are, share them. I was with an organization that has really high turnover, but the reason they have high turnover is because the people get into their organization, get into the contact center, and then they end up in different parts of the organization. And it's a real challenge for the contact center. And when we were talking, I said, listen, that's the biggest attribute you have. It ought to be the number one thing that you communicate when you're hiring people, which is, listen, you don't stay here very long. I mean, our organization is constantly poaching people out of the contact center in all different areas of the organization. So come here, get engaged, learn the business. You can go somewhere else. But in the same thing, if it's an organization that thrives on people that are pretty quick, that are responsive, that like to be in a challenging environment, that like to deal with complicated issues, or they're engaged or enthralled by working with difficult situations, or trying to talk somebody off the ledge of an extra bill. It's just something that they work well with. Embrace it, because if it's something that you can do, then you're going to find people that have those skills and attributes. I know this sounds simple, but just stop the mistakes, change. You know what the problem is? Just fix it. Just fix the particular problem that you have. And the way that you do that is that you acknowledge the fact that you have it, and then you find a solution to it. And I know, and I recognize the fact that many of you might not be in a position to make that decision. For those of you that are in the position and you actually have the authority to change it, you have no excuse. Just go fix it. For those of you that don't, if you want to make a difference, if you want to stand out, don't just identify the problem, come up with a solution or a way to change it, or at least an idea, something that starts. Take on the project. I did a podcast, and I'm going to mention a number of different podcasts that I've done. I've got a podcast called The Contact Center Coach. There's 103 of them out there on all sorts of different subjects that are out there. So I do have one on your ability to get a raise. How do you get a raise and a promotion? It's podcast 47. One of the ways that you get a raise or a promotion is that you help people stop the mistakes. You actually figure out where the mistakes are and you come up with a solution, and you volunteer to try it. You volunteer to change it. You're the person that gets at the lead end of a big, super huge problem that your leader has, and you help fix it. If you want to get a raise, you want to get a promotion, you need to stand out. You want to stand out, fix the biggest problem in your center, or fix the second biggest problem in your center. That's the person that makes a difference. Say often, if you want to be successful, what my leader finds interesting, I find fascinating. You want to know how to advance? What my leader finds interesting, I find fascinating. And what your leader usually finds interesting is challenges and issues that they're looking for someone to step up and fix it. Be that person. And then finally, focus on the entire employee journey. We look at the organization. I've got a slide a little later on that talks about it. I don't think it's the next one. It's not the next one. And that is that we look at the organization as new hire, nesting, first steps on the floor, and then every day in the center. And your organization, your culture, if you want to change the hiring process, they all need to look really the same. They all need to have the same attributes, and so that as your employee moves through their journey, they don't feel like anything's changed. It's not like they've gone to Mars, right? That they're still on the same planet that they started in the organization. So your ability to do that will help you to be more successful. Listen, if there are questions that you've got or things that I say that you either A, completely disagree with, or B, want some more information on, just let me know. I think I can see your chat, so let me know. So anyway, what's another solution? How do we get there? Well, we believe in this adage that build leaders who understand that people in the contact center need joy more than they need KPIs, a sense of purpose more than sophisticated monitoring, and a champion more than a supervisor. What do your people need? They need joy, purpose, and a champion. And that breaks down into three distinct things. Your employees, in order to be successful, they need a clear job description. These are the only three things they need, which is their purpose. They need the skills and tools to be successful at their job. Believe it or not, your employees get joy from being successful. And then finally, they need a leader that has their best interests in mind. They need a champion. They need someone that they can trust. The number one reason, I know you've heard it over and over again, that people leave is usually because of their frontline leader, the person that they work directly for. It's usually the number one reason that they leave. And of course, you could have a miserable organization, which is really, really hard, and there could be all sorts of stress and all those other things. But the reality is, if they connect with their leader, if they've got a connection with that person, they have a tendency to stick around longer. They'll stick around longer than they normally would. That's why that person that directly affects your frontline people is so important. So what does that look like? Well, a clear job description is their purpose. We want them to feel like, and we need to be able to communicate to them that they belong, that they can actually make a difference, that we need them, that we really need them. And that means that in order for them to need them, they need to understand something as simple as call center basics. People that are on the front line can't really help you unless they really understand why they're so important, why you need them so much, why they need to be in their seat, why their AHT changing dramatically changes the world for everybody else, and why them getting better makes a difference. We need to make sure and understand that they understand why they belong and how they belong. They need to understand that it fits for them now. You know what? People are only going to be there for a small season in their life. But if the best thing that somebody can say about your organization is you know what, this place isn't perfect. Contact center EBC, it's not perfect, but you know what? For the time that I was there, I learned, I grew, I was around a lot of people that I enjoyed. I really liked my leader, and when I left there, I was better than when I arrived. And if that's something that you can promise to your employees, I mean, look them deeply in the eyes and promise them that, listen, I promise you, you're going to meet a lot of great people around here. We're going to give you every skill and every investment to help you be really, really successful. So you're better when you arrive, better when you leave than when you arrived. And we're going to give you a leader that's going to care about you and help you become whatever it is you want to become. You'll hold on to a lot of people, and people will stick around for a lot longer because they'll feel like they belong. And then they need to know that they're part of a team, that they're not alone, that they're needed, and that people make a difference. And with that comes purpose. I just did a podcast. It's podcast 104 on Gen Z. That's one of their big things is they want a purpose. They want a purpose and they want to belong. And so your ability to be able to communicate to them their purpose and how they make a difference, not just once a month, not just once a year, but every day, show them how they make a difference, will go a long way to holding on to the people that are Gen Z. So next up are skills and tools, and that's really where their joy comes from. The joy in a contact center comes from being successful, and which means that We're going to invest in their skills, the tools they need to get the job done, and they actually can get better. You've got to have an organization that's consistently filling these people up. If people can't see a way to get better, if people can't see a way to change their circumstances, there's nothing more depressing than having a high HT and no capability of changing it and just going week in and week out, hearing about how your AHT is too high without giving them the skills and tools and skills and information to be successful. Because those are really the only two things that can change AHT, right? Are their skills and their information. And obviously they need to show up and they need to be motivated, but it's skills and information. The second thing to get your joy from is leaving a legacy for, again, whatever their season is. I don't know if they're going to be with you for 6 months. They're going to be with you for a year and a half. They're going to be with you for 10 years. But whatever that season is, they have to be able to leave a legacy. They have to be able to know that their work counts, that it's going to be remembered, and that they made a difference. When was the last time you celebrated somebody that got 5,000 perfect CSAT scores or 10,000 perfect CSAT scores? You don't have to work very hard for very long to get 10,000 perfect scores in a contact center. Do you measure it? Do you keep track of it? That's their legacy. Those are the things that set them apart. Those are the things that the everyday person, when they know they're at 9,999 and their leader knows they're at that, when they hit that 10,000, that's a big deal. And then finally, personal growth. You just can't get away from that anymore. We have to build skills that they can use anywhere. We have to promise that to them. We have to know what it is they're trying to do and help them to get better. You rarely have anybody that says they want to grow up and I want to be the greatest person in a contact center. That's just not the way it works. Normally people want to be in marketing, they want to be in engineering, they want to be president of the United States. They don't want to be in a contact center. That's okay. You can help them build skills that will, for whatever the length of the season is, will help them to be more successful. And if you can do that, wow, they might stick around a little bit longer. Say they stuck around for 30 more days. Let's say you've got 500 people in your center and they just stuck around for 10 more days. That would drastically change your numbers. You have the capacity to do that. And then finally, they need a leader that has their best interest in mind. That's you, the champion. And again, whether that's you for people that are working for you on the front line, or whether you have a leadership position, there are other people that are working for you, you need to be their champion. You need to connect them to the company, to the customers, to their peers, and most importantly, to you. And a champion is their biggest advocate. You are the single most important person in what they do and how they do the things that they do. You're the one that inspires them. You're the one that comes alongside them. You're the one that remembers all the great things that they do. And whether that's yesterday or whether that's 6 months ago, that's you. And you're also the person that helps them grow, that gives them direction, that gives them correction. This is not just life is one big happy meal. I know there's responsibilities as leaders, and then you have a lot of people that don't necessarily fit and aren't doing well. And a lot of the leadership that you have to do as a champion is to help them get better. I love what's that Tom Cruise movie? Help me, help you, help me, help you. That's what it is. That's your responsibility in the job that you're in. All right. So again, those are all those components, but those are the three things that they need: a clear job description, skills and tools, and a leader with your best interests in mind. So I want to talk to you about something really simple in contact centers, and that's that it's a math problem. And this is the math problem. When we maximize time, right, which means that we have engaged employees, and that's all about coaching, that's all about leadership, that's all about you or the people that work for you. When we maximize time and we save time, maximize time plus save time, and saving time is skilled and informed employees. These are employees that are equipped with the skills and the information they need to be successful. And remember, I added two more components to that. One is they have to show up. So we have to physically get them in the seat. We have to help motivate them to make sure they're willing to take a call at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon after a long beating of a day. But if we do that and they have the skills and they're informed, then what we'll end up with is we'll make loyal employees. And when I say make time, what that means is if I have loyal, successful employees and they stick around, we're making time. I mean, there's two sides to turnover, right? One is hiring new people and keeping them. The second thing is holding on to successful people. because I don't just want to hold on to people that are miserable. I want to hold on to people that are really successful. Believe it or not, when they're more successful your employees are, the more loyal they're going to be, because people have a tendency to want to do things over and over again that they do really well. And what better way to do it than in a contact center where every 8 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 4 minutes, they get an opportunity to do something well. So what you end up with is loyal, informed, skilled, engaged employees. That's the answer. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to achieve. If you want to change the turnover and retention in your center, we want to build loyal, informed, skilled, and engaged employees. So let's talk a little bit about the employees themselves and just make sure that we know exactly who we're talking about. I think you have 3 types of people in your center, and I look at it like a garden. The first one is your roses. Rose is a beautiful flower, right? It's the most gorgeous flower there is, right? The White House doesn't have a daffodil garden. It doesn't have a gardenia garden. It has a rose garden. But roses are difficult to grow. They require a lot of fertilizer. They require a lot of pruning, and they can be a little bit prickly at times. And it's the same way with the roses that are in our center. We have a tendency in our organization with roses, we have a tendency to reward this group. And what we really need to do is you need to challenge roses. Roses need to be challenged. If you want to keep a rose around for a little bit longer, you need to find ways to challenge them. Roses are the one that sets your HT. They set your, whatever your CSAT highest ratings are going to be. They set your after call work. They're the ones that solve new problems. They're the ones when new client requirements come on and you've got to make a change. They're the ones that set the standards. Roses need to be challenged. The second group you got is your daisies. Daisies are a beautiful flower. They don't require a lot of effort. They're just pretty. And the daisies represent the largest part of your organization. We've got roses, which represent about 20%. We're going to talk about weeds in a second here that have 20%, but your daisies represent 60% of your organization. These are your average employees. And the problem we've got is that we have a tendency to ignore this group, right? We're so busy focused on the roses and the weeds that we miss this group. I promise you, at no time in the history of your center have you gotten together as leadership and brought a couple other people together and got into kind of a flying duck V, and walk through your center kind of a, dun, 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 dun. You stop in front of an employee and you say, Sally, listen, I want you to know I've got the entire executive team here. We've looked at all the numbers. We've looked at quality. We've looked at productivity. We've looked at adherence. And Sally, half the organization is better than you. Half the organization is worse than you. Sally, you're the most average employee that we have. Congratulations, you're an average employee of the month. Sally, when we think of average, we're going to think of you. It doesn't happen. We don't give away average employee of the month. But the reality is we need to reward this group. You have to pay attention to this group. If you want them to stick around, if you want them to get a little bit better, if you want them to become roses, we have to pay attention to this group. It's really, really hard in an organization. If my CSAT target is 4.7 and somebody's sitting at 4.1, it's really, really hard to celebrate that 4.2 or 4.3. But if you don't celebrate that 4.2, 4.3, they're never getting to 4.7. They're not getting there. We have to be in the business of being able to acknowledge and recognize and celebrate the small wins that people have along the way. And then finally, we've got our weeds. And we have a tendency to punish this group. And the reality is that we need to either eliminate them, which means they need to go somewhere else, or we need to eliminate the fact that, and recognize the fact that they're going to be around. And let me give you a reason why. Because we still need to recognize, reward, and engage weeds. In the NBA championship last year, National Basketball Association championship, for the life of me, I can't remember who won it, who actually won the NBA last year. If anybody remembers, let me know. I think it might have been Denver. But anyway, they got 12 people that play on that basketball team, maybe 13 people that play on that basketball team. There are 3 or 4 people that sit at the end of the bench on the NBA championship team. And in that environment, they're weeds. There's a lot of other people that are much better than they are, that are roses and daisies, that contributed to that championship. But there's probably only maybe 100, 120 professional basketball players in the world. Maybe the number's 150, but they're one of the top 150 people in the world. But in that environment, in what they're in, they're a weed. Well, how do you know you're successful? You know you're successful when your weeds are better than everybody else's roses. That's when you know you're there. So that's why you have to be able to reward and recognize and engage and encourage everybody in your organization, whether they're rose, whether they're daisy or weed. You have to have the same principles, the same excitement, the same perspective all the way through with those people. It never stops. And you can never lose sight of that. Make sure that you understand that. So the goal of every organization is to have all winners. So just a couple of winning frontline culture attributes that I think are important. Number one is ownership and self-motivation. If you're going to have 1 to 15, 1 to 20, 1 to 25, we have to make sure that our employees own what it is they do. You can't do their job for them. They have to own it themselves. Ownership is something that's really, really important. That means you need to give them the information that they need so they can actually own their numbers. We have to be in the business of finding somebody doing something right. And yes, whether you're a rose, a daisy, or a weed, you have to have a culture of people finding somebody doing something right. And there's lots of right things that are going on. And if when you sit down with people and you talk to them, you haven't figured out a way to make sure that you've got a list of things that they've done right, whether they're a weed or not, you're missing out on holding people, on keeping them around. I love to use a concept that's called the sandwich approach, right? Which is that you tell them something good, tell them something challenging, tell them something good. I like your shoes. They look really great. Your AHT is literally in the, is blowing out of proportion. We have to work on that. I really do like those shoes. Bad example, but you get the concept. We can communicate challenging information and make sure that we do it in a way that recognizes and values the people and recognizes that they're doing some things well. If you've ever been in any sort of a personal relationship, I know that whenever you're called out on something that you've done wrong, you immediately think, but look at all the things that I did right. And the reality is you did do a lot of things right. And if the person would acknowledge and recognize the things you've done right, it makes it a lot easier to accept the things that you're challenged on that you need to work on. We need to be a business that's always improving. And I mean, everybody's improving, which means you're pursuing excellence at all levels of the organization. We need to constantly be pursuing excellence. Self-discovery communication means that your front line, or the people that work for you, they need to be responsible for telling you when they do something great. Get into the business of getting your front line to tell you what they're doing well. I love, we've got a learning concept called YMCA for one-to-one coaching. And that's your thoughts, my thoughts. We calibrate, we take action. But the your thoughts are the very first person when we sit down, we recommend when you sit down and have a one-on-one with somebody, the very first person to talk is the employee. And they tell you how they're doing. I mean, they just run over the litany of all the things that they're doing really well, all the things that they're challenged in, any questions that they have, any things they want to go over, whatever their issues are, but they speak first because it forces them to prepare for their one-on-one. It forces them to read off to you all the things that they've done well, all the things that they want to make sure you know. But it shouldn't just be one-on-ones, it should be anytime. I had a supervisor that used to make sure that every time an employee did something right, they told them about it. And so all they did was all day long, they just had people coming up to them or sending them texts or sending them whatever it was, any sort of acknowledgments to let them know what they've done right. Not a bad environment to work in. Obviously, a great culture that connects employees to other employees. And then you need to be maniacal about being on time. Had an old, my daughter had a dance teacher that used to say, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're history. We need to be maniacal about time in your center. If it's not one of your core culture drivers, it should be. And one of the best ways to see this is that you really ought to make sure that your supervisor and leaders, that you don't ever have a meeting that's not on time. I mean, I think you ought to start your meetings at 1:03 or 1:19, and it ought to end at 3:53. And if you have a break, they go out on break and they ought to be back in the room on that time. Because remember the contact center minutes. I mean, literally, when I go into a contact center and I see a leader running to a meeting, I know it's a healthy center because I know they're maniacal about time. So we talked a little bit about I talked a little bit about the four components. I just want you to see that we really look at the center through the eyes of new hire, trainer, incubator and nesting, first steps, and every day in the center. We look at the different people in each part of that organization, and it's one of the things you have to do with retention. We're going to talk in a moment about surveying and the ability to survey. It's really, really important that you make sure that you do that you're actually doing some surveying. And when I get that feedback, if Jane's been with us for 6 years, and on a scale of 1 to 5, we ask, how she feels about things, and she gives us a 2. But Jane's been miserable since, for 5 years. If she actually gave us a 5, we wouldn't know what to do with it. But she's really great at what she does. I'm not worried about that. But if Fred's only been with us a couple of months and he gives us a 2, I'm concerned about that. So we need to be aware of those two different components. So here's some best practices that you need to have in your center for some things that make a difference with retention. First is disciplined coaching. A system and a process that is scalable and easily repeated. If you're an organization that cancels coaching because you're too busy, that's a sign that you don't do very well with turnover and don't do very well with engagement and retention. Coaching is something you should never cancel, which means that you're disciplined about it and it just happens. But coaching needs to also cover many different areas and many different capabilities. It's where you talk about all sorts of different things, but it needs to be disciplined and never change. Daily learning and testing. We are huge believers in purposeful coaching and testing daily. I believe that you should give your employees a quiz every day on a different subject because they need to learn all the time. They should never, ever stop learning. We need to measure legacy measurements. I talked about this before. An organization that measures the moments and contributions that people make over the years where they want to stick around, and it's the one place that they have them. It's very hard to leave an organization where you have 10,000 perfect scores. Just is, because when you go to the next place, you're going to go back to 0. It just makes you stick around a little bit longer. We must have empowered leaders that are skilled and engaged and know what they're doing. And these leaders need to make sure that they really understand the pulse and engagement of their teams. Do you really know what your employees think? Do you measure it enough? We'll talk about that in a moment. Self-discovery, discretionary effort. I talked to you about that before. And then we need to be in the business of finding somebody doing something right. These are best practices. I can send you a copy of this if you want, but you really need to mark off and see where you fit on each one of these. Our priorities with the frontline leaders are that we want to make sure that they get the training and coaching that they need in order to be able to do their job. We need to make sure that they're fit and capable, whether they're working from home or whether they're at work. They're two completely different challenges that they have. We need to make sure that they've got the information in their hands of the performance, the pulse, and the effort of their employees so that they can make decisions with them. And I want to make sure that they've got the tools to help them reward, recognize, renew, and reinforce. And then that they've got the tools to do one-on-ones and notes and shout outs and all the things that are necessary. So those are the things that are our priorities to make sure that your supervisors, your team leads are equipped with so that they can do their job. For the frontline employees, our priority is to make sure that we focus on their loyalty, we focus on their connection, we focus on their learning and their skills and their performance. Those are the 4 areas, the 4 things that we're most concerned about to make sure that these people stick around for a really long time. And by the way, I want people to want to stay whether they're performing well or not. When someone leaves, I want them to leave because we want them to leave, not because we desperately wanted them to stick around and they didn't stick around. Here's some ways that we do that. And first off is training for both the frontline and the supervisors. Short burst training, whether it's 4 or 5 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes, that covers every area. We need to make sure that they're trained and coached in as many ways as we can, because the more information and skills we give them, the better they're going to be at their job. And this is for both the frontline and the supervisors. It doesn't do any good to train the frontline, but not train the supervisors on how to coach the frontline. Customer feedback is gargantuan. I did a webinar recently and asked the folks, how often their reps got feedback. We're able to see their customer feedback. Did they get it every day in the moment? And 75% of them said no. If you want to hold on to your folks, they need to get customer feedback immediately. You need to give them access to get it. There's nothing that's more important or more valuable than your customers' feedback in the hands of your reps as fast and as many or as frequent as possible. Nothing will change their behavior faster than customers' words. If you're not putting that information in their hands really, really quickly and as often as you can, you're missing a huge way to hold on to them. We've got clients that, that their customers give 50, 60, 70 bits of customer feedback over the course of a month. Wow, what a difference that makes, because we all know that a lot of it's really, really positive. I actually have a podcast, 86, for those of you that work with BPOs. It's called Transferring Your Culture to a BPO. It's podcast 86. And the number one way to do that is to make sure that your customer comments get in the hands of your BPO's employees. It makes all the difference in the world. Customer feedback is huge. Quizzes, I mentioned this before, constant, never-ending quizzes. An employee that wants to take a quiz, that wants to learn, that's willing to get another quiz, that wants another question, huge. And the alert that you sent out last week, that on something that was really, really important, we probably can't just do it one day. We probably need to remind them, renew it, recognize it again in a couple of weeks. Your ability to coach people not only on general information they need, but to be able to coach or quiz somebody on an area that they're working on is really important. If I find a way to train or coach somebody on empathy, I probably want to quiz them on it a little bit later on to make sure that it stays in the forefront of their mind so they don't forget it. People need to be told things 7 times in order for them to retain it. And of course, as you already know, in order to change a behavior, it takes 21 days. Quizzes make a difference. We need to connect them. We need to engage them. We need to have shout outs from supervisors of encouragement. We need people to be in challenges. We need to be them in games. We need to be them in things that focus on the areas that are important to them that they're working on. If I tell you that you need to work on a particular area, but I don't give you any training, I don't give you any coaching, I don't give you any reinforcement, I'm not constantly talking to you about it so that we all know that that's what we're working on, you're going to forget about it. You're going to move on to something else. Because let's face it, there's a lot of things you can do wrong in a contact center. But when I can change somebody's behavior, when I can give them some information that they didn't have before, and the next time they get a call and they're able to answer that question quickly, and they now know how to do it and they've mastered it, wow, the world changes. The world changes when we do this. And then, of course, we want to connect them with their coworkers. Well, believe it or not, we actually have a contest that allows coworkers to compete with each other in the area of customer feedback. So they kind of do a one-on-one on what the words are that they say. And it's just a great way to focus on customer words and a great way to stay connected to your employees. But we need to connect to other people in the organization. I've said it all along, when you go to high school, you don't need 7 friends, you need 1. You need 1 to protect you from the bullies and the mean girls. It's the same way in a contact center. I need to at least have 1 friend. I've got to find some sort of way to connect with people. Might make me stick around a little bit longer. If I'm in a game with someone and I like this person, I might not quit. I might stick around for just a little bit longer so that I can connect with them. And then legacy milestones, I already touched on that one. I talked to you about the fact that we need to know the pulse of the people in our organization. It's really important that we recognize and measure their engagement. We love these 7 questions. I think these 7 questions ought to be asked every single month by your reps, so that we know exactly where they are. So it's something that we can chart over the course of time. I did see a question there. We do have a whole bunch of different training that we've got, different courses that we've got, short and long, for supervisors and frontline agents that cover every different area that you want. And we'll be happy to share those with you. It was one of the questions that came in on the thing. The central issue is never strategy, culture, structure, culture, or system. The core of the matter is always changing the behavior of people. That's what we're trying to do. That's really what ultimately we're trying to do with these people. Let me give you a quick example. Sally Service is an employee. She struggles with empathy, adherence, and PCI compliance. So empathy is the area that she struggles with. Maybe we learned this from customer feedback that she received, with customers saying, you know what, I could just tell she didn't care. She was hurrying me along. She just didn't care. Maybe we got it from QM. Maybe the supervisor noticed it. Whatever the reason is, she struggles with empathy. Well, I want to give the supervisor tools that'll help her deal with Sally. I want to make sure that she's got tools that help her conduct one-on-ones. I want to make sure that she has the capacity very easily to send Sally a note on PCI compliance if the system hasn't already sent her something in that area. I want her to be able to shout out when Sally gets a really great customer score. I want her to be able to have the tools to be able to shout out and say, hey, Sally, great job on empathy. I want her to be able to see and watch Sally's performance, whether it's in empathy or any of the other areas. And the other thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to send Sally's supervisor coaching tips on how do I coach somebody who struggles with empathy. Because they can't keep track of all the things. They've got 15 to 20 people working with them. Every one of them's got a different issue. So our ability to be able to give them the tools that help them focus on that particular area is how we make the change in Sally. If you want to fix your contact center, you have to fix it one agent at a time. We have to fix it one problem at a time, and that's a big challenge. But when we begin to break it down and we can begin to focus and pinpoint the areas we need to work on, it makes a difference. So what does that look like? Well, in week one, because Sally's got an issue Sally has an issue with empathy, we might give her a small amount of micro training. We might give her a quiz on empathy afterwards. We might put her in a peer-to-peer game on empathy where she's competing with one of her friends. Maybe she's allowed to challenge somebody. And maybe she's on a leaderboard that's keeping track of the scores related to empathy. And so now she's got a way to do that. Second week, we're sending her some tips on empathy. She gets another shout out from her leader. Maybe she's losing in her one-on-one. So she knows she's behind. So she knows she needs to be a little bit better, more engaging so she can compete with her friend. There's maybe over time we begin to see her empathy following up. And that's just one individual issue. So what happens is, whether it's a coaching tip or a quiz or a one-on-one game or a challenge, then the next week we get a couple more impressions. Through the third week or a fourth week, we've got a number of other impressions. Their supervisors are talking about it because they've been engaged. The system is telling them. All of a sudden, we get a whirlwind of this wave, this crescendo of stuff focused on what's important to her at this particular time, which is empathy. But it doesn't stop with empathy because we're also doing it in all these other different areas. And we're reminding, we're recognizing, we're renewing and reinforcing. So we're tag teaming, preponency, the frontline agent, the leadership, the direction of the organization, the customers, the QM, the supervisors, their peers. Everybody's working together to create an environment where we're acknowledging the things that she does well. We're correcting the areas that she needs to do. We're encouraging, we're renewing, we're reinforcing, and we're celebrating the successes that she has. And when you do this with 20 people, 200 people, 2,000 people, 20,000 people, the world begins to change because all of a sudden we've created a wave and we're moving in the right direction. And it just simply works because if you're making time, right? If we're talking about coaching, what does coaching change? Those are some examples of some KPIs that extraordinary coaching, extraordinary leadership, attentive leadership that's focused on their skills, leaders that know how to connect with employees, leaders that know how to talk to them about career paths, leaders that know how to engage the employee and show them that they care and help them to care more. We affect those KPIs. Informed and skilled employees, people that have the skills and talent, you already know what they affect. And those are the ones that we worry about the most. Those are the ones, the saving times are the ones that change the world. And then maximizing time, again, with the coaching, it changes everything in the organization because we're now actually making a difference. So let me show you, I told you it was a math problem. Let me show you just a simple example. So all I've done here is used some Erlang tables and I've just created a contact center and I'm paying them $20 an hour. I've got 214 FTEs and the cost is $17 million. And all I've done, I want you to look, I think it's the 6th item down. You can see that the coaching hours we're doing 1 coaching hour a month. And the HT is 300 seconds. Everything's kind of the same. And so I'm going to show you this math problem. And all we did is I doubled the amount of coaching time. And you immediately say, there's no way we're going to do that in our organization. There's no way we're going to double the coaching time. But let's just try it out, see what happens. I double the coaching time to 2 hours. Well, now you can see before we had 214 people. Well, now your workforce management can do this. I'd be happy to do that with your numbers if you wanted me to. But you can see that we now need 216 employees, right? We need 2 more people and it's going to cost us $129,000 a year with all the other burden costs that come with it. right? So I added an hour, which, oh no, it changed it. But look what happens, potentially could happen. If I added 2 hours, if I doubled up in the amount of coaching that I was doing, and my AHT went from 300 seconds to 294 seconds, which is 6 seconds, which is a lot, but it's really not a lot when you really think about it. If I could actually change AHT by just 6 seconds by adding an hour of coaching, I would now need 210 employees. And remember, I started with 214s, so I saved 4 people. So by doing more coaching, spending more time coaching, I actually need less people because I actually change what matters. The question is, if you actually added another hour of coaching, would you be confident that the people that you've got in place would have the skills and tools necessary to be able to do that kind of coaching? Again, I just played with numbers. Your numbers would be different, but I promise you the changes that occur wouldn't be that much different. And I'd be happy to work these formulas out with you, or just go talk to your workforce management. And the answer doesn't have to be adding another hour of coaching. The answering might simply be that you need to do a better job with the hour that you're spending. And if you want to know, what you're willing to invest right now in coaching, just figure out how much money you spend today with supervisors coaching, how much agent time, and figure out the millions of dollars that you're already spending in coaching. The question is whether you're getting a real return for it. There was a book, it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Stephen Covey did it. And there was a number of different components of it, and start with the end in mind. And there's 7 different habits. I fell in love with habit number 3, which was put first things first. And what it was that that you kind of got these categories of these urgent, not important things, and then the urgent, important things. That's where we spent all our time. But where we didn't spend our time was in the not important, not urgent, but important things. We failed to do those. And the whole concept is to make sure that you were putting the important things that were not urgent first, which basically was to make time for things that are important. The entire presentation that I gave you here was about making time. How can we hold on to loyal, successful employees? And they are important, and it doesn't seem urgent because we've just got to answer the phone today. But the reality is there could be nothing more important than making time, finding a way to make time to hold on to your employees with retention. And the way that you do that is by having extraordinarily great coaching, which is maximizing their time plus saving time, equals loyal employees and keeps them around for a really, really long time.